Welcome to Sartor TV. I'm Jennifer Crumpton, and today I'm talking with Denise Brosseau, CEO of Thought Leadership Lab and the author of Ready to be a Thought Leader. Hi Denise, thanks so much for being with us today. Denise, tell us a little bit about your career journey.
Well, I'm always embarrassed to share my resume because it kind of jumps all over the place, but it started my first thought coming out of college was maybe I'll go be a lawyer. So I started the world of paralegal, quickly steered away from that and went off into the world of startups. So I did technology for 10 or 12 years and in the middle got an MBA at Stanford and went on from there to found an organization for women entrepreneurs. And that sort of started me on this realm of women's leadership, women's entrepreneurship. How can I help more women? So my mission statement is around more women leaders at the top of every organization. And a lot of the things that I've done in those last 20 years of my career have been around that trajectory.
What do you think it is? What quality or what actions have you taken that have made you successful in your career?
I think it's a lot of risk taking. So much of what I believe about myself is that anything is possible. And I was fortunate to come from a family where that message was clear, got to a college where that message was really reiterated regularly. And so this idea for me that, I always looked at it, I can always type, the backup plan, if nothing else, I can always type. So because I had that, I always felt like I could take the next risk, I could take the next job. And much of what I've done is starting my own businesses, starting organizations, starting initiatives. And so even, at 26, I started my first company and in the tech industry, and then went on later to start a women's leadership company, start a women's organization, start my existing company. And so many of those were stepping into what others see as these huge risks. But seriously, I think of myself as sort of constitutionally incapable of working for other people. So I have to be an entrepreneur because I'm great at working with people, but I'm not so good at working for other people. So a lot of what I do is create from new, create from scratch, and take that risk to create something that I think needs to happen in the world.
So many people find it almost unfathomable to start something, much less start so many things. What is the hardest thing about starting your own organization or project?
I guess I don't look at it as that hard. I don't come with that framework. I think it's hard to go sit in corporate America for 30 years. That to me would be hard. I drive down the road and I see these buildings where people go to the same job, same place every day with the same people. That's hard. What's fun for me, and the risk taking is always modified in some ways by everything that I've started, except for maybe one thing. Everything I've started is because others wanted it. So I started things that were in need in an industry or a community or an organization that was requested. And that just lowers the risk. If you're creating something that people come to you and they say, hey, I need this, or I want that, or can you help me with this? And then you make a business out of it, that takes the risk out because you've already tested it. And all that lean startup stuff that I read is so much the way I lead my life. They're all experiments. And some of the experiments I built into companies, and some of the experiments I don't ever tell anybody about because they were total failures. Right? So, not everything you've done is successful. But I also think that the other piece about risk taking is take smart risks. Keep your day job for part of them. Early in my career, I started a company on the side. Yes, I made more money in my company than I made in corporate America, but it was with that lack of risk because I had a paycheck for most of the time. And that, I think, is the other thing I tell people is make sure you test it out a little and make sure there's actually an income stream before you jump off the bridge here.
What did you learn from your failures?
I learned to listen better. I think so many times when things didn't work out, it was because I wanted it more than the others did. So I think about an early company that I did with a friend of mine, and he had a really cool technology, and I think we kind of both bought in that this technology was so cool, everybody was going to want it. And interestingly enough, I was able to raise money, which I fortunately did not cash the check because we couldn't find the customers. And we thought what we had was so cool, we kind of drunk our own Kool-Aid, and we thought, of course, everybody's going to love this. And realistically, if I'd been listening a little more carefully, we probably could have cut that 6 or 8 month time down to 3 months and really could have moved on more quickly. And so I think listening and really listening to, does anybody really want this? Is anybody willing to pay? And another experience of, I wouldn't call it a failure, but I started another company and the economy crashed and we were working in a space that was a little nichey, and it was one of those niches that got cut before everything else. So part of it is also looking at the trends, looking at doing a little sleuthing, talking to people about what's the potential here. So even if people are coming to you and they want it now, if the economy turns, you better be ready with something else in the back pocket. And sometimes I did that well and sometimes not so well.
What role have mentors played in your career, and who have been your mentors?
I have always thought about it as a personal board of directors. These are a whole group of people, and of course I never convene them as a personal board of directors. They don't come and meet with me and sit in front of me and give me advice, but they all give me advice in different roles, and some of them know they're on my personal board and others don't. So I have one woman, we've had a really lovely back and forth where she mentored me early in my career. She was the VP marketing at one of my early companies that I went to work for, and then later she took some time out with kids, and then she was coming back in the workforce, and I was able to mentor her and help her get back to a career. So it's been a lovely back and forth role, and I regularly call her for counsel. Others, my best mentor is a woman named Sam Horn, who is a speaker and a coach and a consultant, and she's been magic for me. She's so many of the things that I take on. It's often her who said, Denise, you could try X. And then I go try X and I'm like, oh, wow, that was amazing. And because she's had the career that I always wanted, 5 or 10 or 15 years before I did. And so she's seen the path, and she pushes me along that path and helps me to test new things and to try to think bigger, which is what we all want in a mentor.
What advice do you give young people who are entering the business world wanting to rise to the top today?
I've been going through this a little right now. My niece, who I adore, just graduated college in June, and it's been so fun. She's been out here in California visiting, and she's now going to come back and live here. And it's been so fascinating. I was completely clueless coming out of college about how to find a job. I really didn't know anything, and so I'm very sympathetic, and so many of the connections that I can use, that I know I can use. So what I tell her is, this is the chance you have to eliminate all those crazy things you're never going to want to do, but you won't know until you go try them. So whether it's an informational interview, whether it's an internship, whether it's a short, shadow somebody, I want her to go try as many things as she can. When I was early in my career, I fortunately did have an opportunity, not just in full-time jobs, but when I moved to California, I was 25, 26, and I decided I just would temp for a year. I didn't know California, I didn't know the businesses, so I did that old role of, Kelly Services or whatever it was equivalent back then, remember that? And I would temp in all these different offices, and I'll tell you, I eliminated, never want to work in insurance, never want to work in banking, never want all these things, until I finally fell into this job at Pacific Bell, the early Pacific, before Pacific Telesis and all the others, and I got in this role where my job was to sit in my cubicle and read and edit the documents that were going through the word processing department. I'm really aging myself here, but the documents, it turns out, were from this incredible marketing team who was doing the strategy for telecom for the next 10 years. And I thought, people get paid to figure out the strategy for telecommunications for the next 10 years. I want that job. And that was the first chance that I had to see about marketing, to see about strategy, to understand that there was this whole career path. And that ended up being the career path that I took because I had that opportunity to sit there. And I met a mentor, I developed a mentor of one of the guys who would come to the department all the time and always have these really fascinating documents. And of course I interviewed him, like, how did you get there? And I took a lot of great advice from what I learned, but only because I eliminated 25 things before that of what I don't want to do. So I
and
think
now there's even more choices, right?
I know. I do feel a little bad for these folks because there is way more options than we had.
What would you say has been the biggest challenge in your career, and how did you overcome that?
That's a great question. There's been the personal challenges and then there's been the professional challenges. So early in my career, 27, 28, 29, it was a really tough personal time. My dad got emphysema. My mom was diagnosed with breast cancer. My best friend's husband got a brain tumor. And that was sort of 28, 29, 30. That was sort of that year and a half of time. And it was, in some ways it was great because it gave me all this time to think and to really assess, was this the career path that I wanted to be on? Spending a lot of time sitting in in hospital rooms, really having a chance to reflect on your life while you're taking care of someone. And it pushed me to go think bigger, and thinking at any time this could be me sitting in this in this hospital bed. And this sense that I had of, okay, am I living the life that I want to be living? Am I pushing myself far enough to go where I need to go? So that was the personal side. And sort of as a side note, my mom is doing fine. My best friend's husband had 3 IPOs. He's doing just fine. I did lose my dad to emphysema the following year, but it was that was the turning point for me in my personal life. And then on the professional side, it was really the .com crash here in Silicon Valley. I'm running a nonprofit, working with women entrepreneurs. I'm having this opportunity to grow this organization to all these different offices, and everything is going great until it wasn't. Suddenly all the money dried up, and entrepreneurship wasn't cool, and women's entrepreneurship definitely wasn't cool. And we really faced that moment of truth. Is this organization viable? Can we get the funding to go forward? And we were a very leading indicator. And I learned a lot about myself in both of those processes. I learned a lot about resilience and about the willingness to self-examine and explore, but also I learned how to ask for help. And that was something that I'd always thought, oh, I'm really good at that. But when push came to shove, I didn't really want to admit that the economy was tanking my organization and that we were on the verge of going under. And it was, the funny story is that I kept having men call me, and they kept saying, could you help me, introduce me to this bank or this accountant or whatever, somebody that could help them turn their company around. And I kept saying, don't you see I'm running the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs? Like, that says women. Why are you calling me? And yet what I realized is the women weren't calling me. There was 1,200 members all across 7 states, and they weren't calling me, and I wasn't calling anybody. So I look at that time and I say, we were kind of hiding under our beds. We were kind of thinking that we should handle it, that we should be able to overcome. But meanwhile, the global economy is melting down. Why did I think that I could do that? Why did I think that I could overcome this terrible disaster? And so learning from these guys, they were fearlessly and shamelessly asking for all the help they could get from anybody. And when I turned it around and started doing that, that's when things got back on track, and that's when we managed to save the organization and put some more money in the bank and so on. But so I learned a lot about myself. I learned a lot about how I am in crisis and how to be better in crisis, because we all have them. There's no question we're going to have crises.
As the CEO of Thought Leadership Lab, you have worked with a very diverse range of professionals, from CEOs to entrepreneurs to startups. Amidst that range of people, what would you say makes a great leader?
I don't know that there's just one thing. Going back to even what I was talking about with the resilience, I do think resilience is a key component, because things will go wrong, and being able to pick yourself up and brush yourself off. But I guess the other thing that I would say is the commonality is some passion for what you're doing, some real commitment to something bigger than, okay, I need that paycheck. If you're really just committed to the paycheck, you shouldn't be in that job. So the leaders that I get the privilege to work with, social entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, so many of them, and executives, there's so many of them, are so committed to something bigger than themselves. And I feel very fortunate to help them on that journey, because they see a world that they want, and they are working to create that world. And that it makes a great leader, just because of that commitment. You can enroll people, you can bring people on board if you are excited about a future and creating that future. And those are the best leaders I know.
Let's talk about your book, Ready to be a Thought Leader. Why did you decide to write this book, and why did you do it right now?
I look back and I think, what was I thinking? It's so much work to write a book. I'm really similarly passionate about this topic as I say other people get passionate about what they're passionate about. I've had a journey of my own from leader to thought leader. I call myself an accidental thought leader. I was running this nonprofit, and I had this opportunity to be one of 3 or 4 people in the United States who knew anything about high growth women's entrepreneurship. How do women build big businesses? And at the time, the economy is going crazy. There's tons of women starting these kinds of businesses. There's finally money for women entrepreneurs. And so I'm getting all these calls, and I have this chance to be in front of public forums and be serving on boards and getting a chance to really articulate the message of what it takes to do this, why it matters, what people should do to do better for women. And this opportunity and this trajectory just kind of led me all over the world and led me to make a difference in a way that I'm proud of and very much enjoyed. And then a few years go by, and I get a call from a friend of mine, and she says, Denise, I really want to be a thought leader, like you were. And I remember thinking to myself, I was a thought leader? What? That's such a weird word, because it's not something it's not a term you necessarily heard back then, and it's not a term you necessarily apply to yourself. And so that was really a gift in some ways. And she said, I want to sit down and create a plan. So we did. We sat in our living room one day and we created this 5-year plan of how she could go from unknown to being this thought leader in her field. And not only did she go from unknown to thought leader in her field, but kind of blew it out of the park in 3 years and went from building this program within her company, building it then across her industry, gaining a lot of platforms to push a very important message forward, testifying in front of the US Senate, recognized by the White House, and eventually headhunted by the governor of California to do that same role at the state level. And when you see that trajectory, for me, it was such a wake-up call to realize you don't have to do this by accident. You don't have to be in the right place at the right time, which is what I was. You actually have an opportunity to build a thoughtful plan and really make a change happen in the world, and then take a broader platform to move that forward more broadly. That was the message I wanted to share. So I started teaching it in workshops, at conferences, and to people whenever I would have the chance, and I would tell her story, and people would say, I want to do that. And so going back to what we talked about, people kept calling me and saying, hey, I heard you did that with her, I want to do that. That's when you know you have a business, right? So that's the good news. But secondly, I then got an email one day from this woman at Wiley, and she said, have you ever thought about writing a book? And so I took the visual that I had created from the workshop. I'd hired a graphic facilitator, and she'd done a document that highlighted the steps that I had outlined in the workshop. And I took this and I said, I'd love to write a book about this. And the woman said, yes. It was a very simple conversation, and that became the ground upon which I built the rest of the book. Because the steps that I had at first were not what the final ones were, but I felt very called to share this experience. I wish I'd had this book in the early years of my career. I wish somebody had taught me how to take that so much further. What I was doing at the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs, there was a much bigger story. And when I got involved with that across the United States and had this chance to make this bigger impact, brought me so much joy. Well, what if other people could do that? What if they could move their points of view forward? If they could move their change more broadly? That's what I wanted to create for people.
So who should read this book? And what is the one overarching big idea that you want them to walk away with?
The people that I would like to invite to read this book are change agents. Now, the reason I like to say it that way is that it isn't one role or one background or one set of experiences. People are creating change in companies, in organizations, in communities, all around the United States, all around the world. If this trajectory of leader to thought leader was clarified for them, they could take that change that they're making and just explode it into a much bigger change that often they want, but they don't know how to go beyond the small piece that they're taking on. So I really believe that if those folks who are making any kind of change in something that they are passionate about, then this book can help them. And that is what I want to give them, these sort of 7 steps. You don't always do them in the same order or whatever. You may have to do a few of them sort of in an iterative process. But the invitation is, here's the steps you can take. Here's the kinds of resources that I can make available to you to make that path go much more smoothly.
So what exactly is a thought leader?
Oh, such a great question.
And why should women want to be one?
Yes, and really for me, my personal passion, as I've said, is more women leaders. So if I had had my druthers, I probably would have written this book all for women. My editor had something to say about that, obviously. So she says, why are you leaving 50% of the population out? Oh, okay, all right. So it is a general, all people book. But the reason why I think women should take a particular point of view is that there's too many male voices making decisions for the things that we care most about, whether it be family decisions, personal health decisions, whether it be our communities, whether it be our education of our children, whatever. Those decisions, we don't have a seat at that table. We don't have our voice being heard. Now, it's not to say completely, but often the beliefs and the ideas and the best practices that we are seeing that work are not being shared. You know, we're being told what to do rather than having a seat to say, here's what we should do together. And so for me, the invitation is, what if I could give women the tools to get a seat at that table? What if I could give them the tools to have their voice be heard and build a platform upon which not just to make this a small change, which is often where they begin, but to make broad and lasting change that is going to help their families, help their communities, help their organizations move forward. And that, I think, is where the real power lies in the message that I'm trying to get. So going back to what is a thought leader, it starts as a change agent. It's someone who's making change, often in one community, one organization, one city, whatever, and then they want to broaden it. You know, the big picture might be creating a movement around their ideas, but not everybody wants to create a movement. I'm completely recognizing that. But instead, it's like, how can I move change forward? Take the learning that I have made in whatever effort I'm doing and spread it so that I don't have to do all the work that it's going to take to make the big change, but I can be part of a broader conversation. I can help others to move more quickly. I can share the ideas and join the conversation in a way that moves everything more effectively forward in whatever I am caring about, whatever I'm trying to change. Those to me are real thought leaders. It's not just anybody who starts their first Twitter account and starts shouting to the world. You know, I think it's a much more about making real change.
You ask in the book, what do you want to be known for? Why is this question so important, and how do we begin to answer it?
When you're really thinking about thought leadership, this is about making a difference. And it is the sense of having a reputation and having an understanding in your community that you are that go-to person in whatever field, in whatever arena, whatever niche you're playing in. So what do you want to be known for is really about what is that niche and what do you want people to be able to identify you with? What cause, what change, what possibility are you to be affiliated with? For me, you can't play in 53 different sandboxes, and I've had a little trouble with this. You know, I'm not that good at focus. But if you can find that focus, if you can find that one place, what the magic that turns around and happens is people suddenly know, okay, she's the one or he's the one that has the expertise or is making change here. What if I sent them resources, people, ideas? Now your possibility gets way bigger. So when I was doing the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs and I became this thought leader in women's entrepreneurship, for years afterwards, every time somebody would meet a cool woman entrepreneur, oh, you have to meet Denise, right? Because I had that niche, I was that girl. And I see that same thing happen for my clients. As they start to put their stake in the ground and they start to own a space, everybody starts to send them those people who belong in their tribe, those people they need to know. That's the gift of what do you want to be known for, is to find your tribe, establish that tribe, establish yourself as one of that tribe, and then others will send your tribe to you. It's really that next step is really fun. You don't even realize it's going to happen.
So let's break down the 7 steps that you talk about in Ready to be a Thought Leader. Share them with us briefly.
Well, I think the first 3 chapters are really about getting started. It's the first few steps of finding your passion. Where is it you want to play? The second is around starting to build those first ripples of change. What are the few steps that you need to take that will get you going? And how do you start testing those ideas? And then the third is the chapter is all about how do you then build some alliances. So I call it activate your advocates. What are the people around you who could help you move that change forward? In the middle of the book, I spent a whole chapter talking about how to get out of our own way and get others out of our way, right? So much of what I learned in writing this book is that we all have little demons, or as one of my clients calls it, the itty bitty shitty committee, right? That shows up.
I love that.
It's very loud in our head about why we're not the one, or we're not smart enough, or we're not good enough, whatever the story is. And as I went around talking about this book last year, it was so fascinating to hear how many people from every community had, there was a cultural norm that we don't do this, or there was a family norm, or there was a community norm, or my boss doesn't like it. So there's a lot of outside stuff, and then there's also the inside stuff. So the middle chapter is how do you get over that? And then the last 3 chapters are really about scale. So there's a whole chapter on codifying your lessons learned. What is it you know? What is the path forward for others? What is it, the 7 steps? What are your equivalent 7 steps? It may not be 7 steps, but what are those lessons that you've learned? And then there's a chapter on what I call put yourself on shout. Get yourself out there, or make yourself discoverable. Make sure people know what your niche is. And then the last chapter is about auditing, following along and seeing what change you're really bringing about. And also, I added a whole section on how do you take care of yourself through this, because this is a long journey. This doesn't happen overnight, and if you're not monitoring your own health and wellness and well-being, you will burn out. And I know I have, and I've seen others do the same. So I try to work hard in this book to let people see that take this as a journey, not as a short road trip here that you're going to be all done in a week or 2. This is prepare for the long haul and build allies. Think about passing that baton. So that's that whole last chapter.
You talk a lot about discovering your passion, but why is finding your niche and really just honing in so important as the first step before you get all passionate, too passionate?
Yeah, I mean, they're tied together because you need the passion in order to figure out your niche. I often say, let's find that place you're passionate, because that journey will take a while, and if you're not passionate about something, you're going to drop by the wayside very quickly. But the niche, I think, goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Is like, if you are going to be established in one arena, that is going to help you. It's going to help you. First of all, you'll be more focused. You won't be all over the map. But secondly, it will help others to know where you're playing and what is your tribe. And third, I think you could make far more difference if you are playing in one particular arena that is there's trends that are aligning to you, there's need, there's a market need. So I talk a lot about that in the first chapter. It's not just, oh, I want to go do X, but back in what I've learned in my career is you better have somebody who's paying attention. First of all, the niche shouldn't be so tiny that there's only 5 people who are listening. But secondly, it shouldn't be so that what you're taking on should be part of a broader community. You're not supposed to take the whole world on your own. So thinking about that tribe, thinking about who else is making change that are in my adjacent possible that I should align with. But you don't do that until you find the niche. Like, how can you find who's adjacent to your niche until you find one? So that's a sort of a long answer, but I think it's all intertwined. And it's safety in numbers, so once you find your niche, you can find that tribe to play with.
What is the thought leader intersection point, and how do we get there?
The thought leader intersection point is that place where your expertise, your credibility, and your passion intertwine. So I think of it as the Venn diagram. If you look at all those circles and where do they overlap, that's the thought leadership intersection point. So I ask people in this first chapter, I give them a very step-by-step exercise that they can walk through that says, why should anybody believe you? Like, what do you bring to the table? What's your expertise? What are the credentials you bring? Which might be your title, it might be a degree, it might be just some real time that you've spent doing whatever it is you're doing. And then third is this piece of what you're passionate about. And if people can really document those 3 overlaps, where do those 3 overlap? That's where you're going to find your niche. Now then I talk about, as I've said, making sure you either align to trends or you're going counter trend. All of that is the second step, but finding that intersection where those overlay. And adding to that is this piece that says this does not mean you're going to have 50 years of expertise or 15 credentials to start with. So don't get discouraged. Instead, it's as you're building your plan, think about what am I doing to build that expertise and to build that credibility and credentials so that people will find a reason to believe me and they will want to take that change and move it forward that I'm advocating.
What are some ways that we can test and refine our ideas? I know sometimes doing that can feel overwhelming. Where to start to do that?
I like to tell a story about this because there is not one way. So I like to share the story of my co-founder of the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs. Before I really got involved with FWE, she had been working on this initiative for several months, and she was clear that the challenge ahead was that there was all these women starting businesses, but so little venture capital funding was going to them. At the time, it was less than 1%. So she had this statistic, she wanted to do something about it. Well, there's 100 ways she could have addressed it. She realized she didn't know what the right approach was. She didn't really understand why were women getting only 1%. She didn't really understand what it took for them to get better and bigger. And so she really started doing her homework. And so I advocate for people to think, who knows the answers to that question? The change you want to bring about in the world, why has it not already happened? What's already been tried? What are some of the paths that you could take? You don't know that just sitting in your own cube or your own home. So you have to build a little community of people. For her, she did it as a project at business school, and she built a little advisory board of 10 or 12 folks who had been in that ecosystem, bankers, lawyers, accountants, and folks like this. And she brought them together to have these conversations saying, okay, we've got this statistic that's wrong, less than 1%. We want it to be much bigger. 50% was our goal. And what can we do about it? And people gave her all kinds of ideas. And one by one, she sort of started to explore them. Okay, here's one option. Oh, don't want to do that. Here's another. Somebody's already doing that. Oh, there's 3 people doing this. What's not being done? And so both in her challenge was both to figure out the underlying causes, but also who was already playing in this space. And so it's similar to doing a startup. You want to figure out, why would anybody want this product? Who's already doing it? It's the same conversation that big companies take when they venture in. But as you're starting a new initiative, I encourage people to do that. Go out and be brave enough to say, either here's the change I want to bring in the world, or here's this crazy idea I have. Do you think I can even do this? And I talk about collecting your bouquet of no's. There's going to be no, all the people who think, they're going to tell you all the reasons it's not going to happen. But if you get discouraged, then you're going to stop. I say you want to collect the whole bouquet of tons of no's, because then you see where the yeses are. You can't see the yeses until you've heard the no's. And as you distill the no, there's a little kernel in each time somebody tells you no. They often say, no, but if you did it this way, you could do, you'd be more successful. Listen for that. That's when you really have something. So, that's all a long answer, but I think it's a piece, part and parcel. Be brave, tell lots of people, listen for the no's, and listen for the underlying yes that you can bring together into a possible future.
So how can we start to build real momentum behind our ideas and our thought leadership?
Yeah, momentum is everything, isn't it? We can get so tied at just making these little incremental changes, and then suddenly something tips and you start to have momentum. If I think about it from my own career, from seeing my clients do it, momentum often happens when we start gathering others around us who are committed to the same efforts that we are. So going back to that effort about talking about the tribe, no matter what you're doing, there's probably already people working on this. For me, when I was running the Forum for Women Entrepreneurs, I would get a call from somebody in another city, and they're working on something similar. And then I get a call from the Kauffman Foundation, who funded entrepreneurship all around the country, and they were doing this initiative around women's entrepreneurship. And now I found this whole other group of people. Then on the National Women's Business Council, a whole nother group of people. So what you're looking for is who's already working in this arena, who's already playing in your sandbox, and how can you start to add your story to theirs, add your change to theirs. The more we go it alone, the slower it is. And by the way, lonely, depressing, all those, we won't go down that path, right? You want to be with other people who are either have already done some of the things you're thinking and can tell you how to go faster, or collaborate and cooperate together to make a bigger change. Whether you're trying to make change in search engine optimization or you're trying to make change in the military, it doesn't matter. You need other people around you who care about, or at least, aren't trying to push the exact opposite change to what you're trying to change.
What are some tips that you have for both finding and activating your advocates?
What I've realized in this journey of going from leader to thought leader is that there are people who are willing to help you, and you don't always look for them. So what I want to encourage people is to say, why might somebody want to help me? Instead of the other story, which often goes through our head, is that I'm alone and nobody cares. Instead, it's thinking to yourself, first of all, who is my inner circle? Like, who are the people who just trust me? As one of the guys I interviewed talked about it, is like, who owes you loyalty, equity? Who is loyal to you and you have some equity in the bank with them? You've already done them a favor. You've helped them on a project or an initiative. You've actually helped a cause that they care about or introduced them to someone. Those are people that you've got, it's the favor bank, right? Who can you call that you already have a favor with? And spend that favor when you're trying to make a change happen. So that's the first group, that sort of inner circle. Could also be friends, it could also be family, although some of those people are often a little afraid to get engaged with us. So I say look a little bit outside that, at people, former colleagues, people that you've built a trust with in a nonprofit that you've worked in, a board you've served on, a school group that you were a part of, whatever it might be. The second piece is then to look at the cause itself and think, who are the more visible people that are related to this cause? And there's always people who know way more than we do in whatever it is. And rather than be afraid and think, oh, I can't approach those people, recognize that they need you. You know, that you are echoing what they are echoing in the world, what that they're saying in the world, and you're that amplifier of their message. And if you position yourself as that amplifier, then they're much more likely to want to align with you. It doesn't mean you're going to get 5 hours of their time, but you might be able to help have them share your ideas as you're sharing theirs. That's a second group of people. And then I'd say the third group is to really look online and say, what are some of the groups and communities, whether it be a meetup group or whether it be a LinkedIn group or whatever, who are some of the conveners of these kinds of groups that might be, and that might be the same person as that second category, but who are the conveners that I can start aligning with, conversing with, sharing my ideas with? How can I help them and move whatever they're trying to move forward, and thus then secondarily then have them help us? So it is often about doing a bit of work to figure that out. I'm not saying this all happens. It doesn't all fall in our lap. We have to do a little homework. But those are the people, I think, that can be our advocates if we also take the point of view that we can help advocate what they want to move forward to.
What kind of internal dialogue do we need to be having with ourselves to help us move forward as thought leaders, and how can a tiny orange kitten help us?
I created this wonderful picture that I started sharing in all of my talks, and it's the picture of this little tiny orange kitten looking in this mirror with this gigantic orange lion looking back at him. And I think to myself that this is us in the morning. We get up and some days we see the little kitten, and maybe we see even a smaller kitten than we really are in the mirror, and we think, I can't do this. This is too hard. And then some days we get up and we see this lion and we see ourselves as much bigger and much more successful than we ever imagined. And what I try to talk about is what is, as you say, that inner dialogue that helps us see that lion more often. I created a page on my website, and there's a little link at the bottom that says, if you want to see the lion more often, get in touch. And I get these funny emails from people saying, I want to see the lion, right? So that's the conversation I want to have with people. So much of the inner dialogue is often either something we heard from our family member, or something we heard from a teacher, or someone who just wasn't on our side, a sibling, a bully, somebody that just told us we're small. And instead, I really am about how do you build a community of people around you that are your champions. So I talk about everything from having a purse club, which I want to explain, to having a mastermind, which I think is a more common phenomenon. So the purse club, I learned from this woman. I went to this event one day, and she and I were sitting at this big table, 10 people for dinner, and she put her purse on the table, which I thought was so odd. They're serving us dinner. Why is her purse on the table? And so finally at the end, I went over and I said, that's a really beautiful purse. Where did you get it? And this grin came across her face, like just lit up. And she said, oh, I got this from my purse club. I'm like, okay, Tell me more. Now I'm really intrigued. She said, well, when I first started my career, she said, I looked around and there was nobody really there to help me. So I decided to buddy up with my friend. She said she really helped me prepare for interviews. She would look at an upcoming networking event, and so she would help me to go and be my wing woman, and all these different things this woman was doing for her, and vice versa. She said, but when something worked out, I didn't really feel good about giving her money. So what we decided to do was we would buy each other a purse. She said when we first started our careers, the purses were little, just a little tiny thing. And she said, my friend just got this big new job and I just got this fabulous new purse. And I thought, wow, there's a whole nother frame of reference. Like, who is your purse buddy or your bow tie buddy? I don't care what it is that you want to give each other, but it is that person that is, they're your wing person. They're your person that's looking out for you and that you go with when the chips are down, or when you need to be at an event that you don't feel comfortable at, or when you are hesitating to make that call. So it's the purse buddy, and then the second is the mastermind. Like, how can you find people who are similar to you, similar in the stage in which they're creating their idea or their change, similar in the size of business they're growing, similar as a social entrepreneur, whatever it might be. And can you come together once a month or once a quarter to help push each other? So I don't say you want competitors in that room, but if you have a committed time with others who will come with their problems, you come with your problems, and you share resources and ideas, that's when we all move forward. So I'm in several mastermind groups, and I really believe that all of these things are what it takes to overcome that inner voice or that old story that we're telling ourselves about why it's not possible. If you're going to see the lion, you need a lot of other lion people around you who are going to push that forward for you.
You have an interesting case study in your book about Zoe Dunning. Share the lesson of her case with us.
Zoe is one of the two reasons I really wrote this book, so I'm very glad you asked me that question. Zoe, I had the good fortune of meeting when I was at Stanford Business School. She was actually in my class at Stanford, and right as we were finishing graduate school, she had an opportunity to make a difference in something that really mattered to her. Zoe was in the military before she went to business school. She went to the Naval Academy, and when we were at Stanford was the time when Bill Clinton was about to come into office. And Zoe is gay. She's been in the military in a situation where that could never be spoken. And now Bill Clinton is saying for the first time, we're going to repeal this don't ask, don't tell policy. And so all the people who were in the military who were like her, very quiet about their sexual background, they kind of came alive and said, okay, we've got to do something about this. So there was a rally here in Silicon Valley. And she remembers thinking at that time, I want to go speak at that rally. She said that the speech kind of downloaded right to her typewriter that day, but she said she knew that the likelihood is if she spoke at that rally, her career in the military was over, because she'd seen several people who were around her who had spoken up about their sexuality get kicked out. She decided to go ahead. She was graduating business school, she was in the reserves, she had this long, good, solid career behind her, and she already had a job. So she said, her risk profile was better than many of the people around her who were career military. And she also realized that as a Naval Academy graduate and a Stanford MBA, she had a platform in a way that others didn't. She's also a very funny and very accomplished speaker, so I think that helped. So she got up at this rally and she spoke, and within literally 3 days, the military started pushing her out. But the uncommon story is that she is the only person who actually won her lawsuit against the military. She's the only person in history that was allowed to stay in the military after she came out as gay. And she had a unique defense. It's complicated, I won't get into it. But after that won, it took 2 years, $500,000 of this law firm that supported her, who did it pro bono. After that 2 years were over, she was now literally the only person in the military who is gay, openly gay, and still in the military. And now, as she says, it became a crusade for her. She really felt like she was the one. She was the only person. She was speaking for an entire community of people, and because they could not speak for themselves, it's so much unlike all the rest of us. Whatever cause I'm moving forward, there's other people who are moving that cause forward. And for her, they were too, but none of those people were in the military. They might be ex-military people, they might be all kinds of people who had lots to say, but they knew nothing about what the real experience was that she was having and that others were having. So she stayed in the military for many more years. I think it took 18 more years of her career pushing this cause forward, as she got promoted twice, despite all the people saying that, you know, gays in the military are going to ruin the military. She got promoted to commander, and she also started a nonprofit which was working with service people who were facing retaliation for being potentially gay, even if they were or they were not. At the same time, she had a career, and she went out whenever she could and spoke and testified in front of the Senate and spoke to anyone who would speak with her. And I think this story is so remarkable because it was a story of somebody who was the only voice. And when Obama finally repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, she was up there on the stage with him, one of the few people who got one of the pens after he signed the bill repealing Don't Ask, Don't Tell. And she, you know, she tells the story so beautifully, and now they've done a documentary about her and some other folks, and she's now going to be running for office. And I just look at everything she's done as someone who lived the honor that she was taught in the military. She lived the code of being an honorable person, and she overcame enormous odds and a lot of people who were wanting her to be much quieter. You know, they wanted her to shut up and stand aside and don't talk about this. And she always said to me during the interview that when I talked with her about it, she said, my mom always taught me that if you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. And she wanted to be part of the solution, and I think that's the way she's lived her life. So to me, this leader to thought leader story here is someone who stands for something that I believe was the right thing to stand for. And whether you do or don't believe that, it's still a remarkable story, and it's a remarkable reminder to all of us. When we get in our head and we say, I'm not the one, I'm not smart enough, I'm not capable, my family doesn't want me, whatever the story is that we're telling ourselves, I always remind people, like, who are you the one that is speaking? Who are you the only one that has the platform and the voice that can move something important forward? Who are you the representative for? And if you can figure that out, often you can get out of your own way and get those voices out of your head and just move forward like Zoe did. So I honor her and respect her, but I love her story because I think it helps the rest of us to be braver and to stand forward, which is what we should all be doing.
It really does help when sometimes you can think less about what you're doing and more about, and the risks you're taking, and more about the community that you're advocating for. But also, I think her story just really highlights that there's the triumphs of being a thought leader, but then there's a lot of sacrifices too. I mean, years and years of criticisms and setbacks and probably all kinds of harassment.
Yeah, and to keep your sense of humor through that, which she did, I have to give her credit, because it takes something. But also, as you say, stick to it. 18 years. I look at these kind of stories, or I look at some people who have moved forward the rights of African Americans or women or whatever cause they care about. It just means that there is much change that's still needed, and thank goodness for people like her who are being part of that story.
How on earth can we start to get past that fear and loathing of the whole self-promotion process? I know some people just really have a hard time with it.
Yeah, I talk to my clients about this constantly. I think this is a regular story for all of us, that sense that people should just see the good work that I do. They should really recognize and push me forward because I'm doing good things. But the world isn't fair. The world doesn't work like that, you know? So, and yet we also look at these people who are self-aggrandizing and, oh, I'm so fabulous all the time, and we think, ooh, that's icky. I don't want to be that. But I often tell people that, you know, those people are a 10 on a scale of 1 to 10. They're fortunately fewer and far between, but we see them, they're very visible, and we think, oh, I don't want to be that. But most of us are like a 1 or a 2, you know. I always want you at the 5 or 6. So what I really want to think about is, if you are speaking about something you care about, if you're moving forward a change in your company, in your community, doesn't that matter more than whether or not you are too big for your britches, or whatever the story is you're telling yourself about, oh, I shouldn't be self-promoting because it's bad or wrong. Instead, I could say focus on the cause, focus on the change. And I talk a lot in the book about the what if future. For me, what if women had 50% of the venture capital funding in the United States? That was my what if future. It was very motivating. And by the way, it's been a lot of years since I started working in this industry, and we're still at maybe 8%.
Really?
So, yeah. Oh yeah, the highest I think we've ever been is maybe 10. So we have a enormous path ahead. You know, we've got a long way to 50, and that is what keeps me going. Instead of worrying about whether I'm too loud or too uppity or whatever, it's like, who else is going to move that effort forward if I don't move it myself, and if I don't get others to join me? So I try to get people to be outside themselves and let go of that. And then I love Guy Kawasaki. He talks a lot about how, you know, if you done it, it ain't bragging. You know, this is the truth. If you are adding value, then get out there and add value, and don't worry about those naysayers and those people who are judging you.
How can we create a method for stopping and reflecting on our lessons learned?
It's such an important piece of the puzzle. It was the piece, I think, of the book that I honestly didn't know before I started writing it. And I am a startup girl. I mean, as I said, my early career, I started things, and I've started all these groups and organizations. I love that first phase. I love it when there's no document that tells me how to do things. There's no book already written. And so irony, of course, of writing my own book on this, because I understand now, after many years, the importance of having that path forward that maybe can move a little more quickly if I have written things down. But as not a naturally self-reflective person, I'm much more extroverted. It is more of a struggle for me. So I really recommend to people to find maybe others if you don't have the skill, or if it's not something that you enjoy of codifying the lessons. Find others, whether it be a curriculum developer or a knowledge management expert. There's lots of these people out in the world that really do, or somebody else who's making the change with you, who loves to write things down and document what you've learned. But here's why it's important. It's so much about not reinventing the wheel every time and helping others move more quickly. If you really want to bring about big change, you know, you want Black Lives to matter, or you want your company to adopt a new quality standard, or whatever it might be, having some, whether it be a document or a book or a website or a video or whatever, that others can see what you're saying in a visual way, in a takeaway manner that they can immediately apply, you're going to move everything more quickly. So if you're not this person, find, as I say, find somebody else who is. But secondly, value the time, that sort of self-reflection time for yourself. One of the guys I interviewed for the book, Chip Conley, he talked a lot about how in his 30s he's building this company, and he's having a lot of setbacks, and he built the second largest boutique hotel chain in the United States, and he did it through major economic downturns. And he said to me, you know, this chance he had to go out and speak, part of it was that he needed to have a chance to reflect on the wisdom he was gaining. So he would take a moment and have what he created was this sort of wisdom journal. So I encourage others to say, take an evening once every month or once every quarter and just say, what did I learn from all these things that happened to me, and what could I take forward, and what could I be sharing with other people?
So one of the things that's really important about being a thought leader, if you're going to go to all that trouble, good trouble, is to know how and understand how to amplify the impact that you're having. Walk us through your shout process that you developed.
Yeah, and rather than go through all the steps, I'll just kind of give you the underlying concept here. To me, putting yourself on shout, as I talk a lot in the book about, is really about being discoverable. If nobody knows what you're doing, if no one can find you, then really all the change you're making is going to be smaller as a result. It's not to say you won't make change, but in order to find the tribe or have the tribe find you, you need to be discoverable. Now, that can be 100 different ways. It could be that you're really great at doing podcasts. It could be that you love to speak. It could be that you're a really great writer and you can guest blog or blog. There's 100 ways to put yourself on shout. But what I recognize is that part of this framework of crafting those top 3 messages is part of the fundamental success factors of a thought leader. You need to have a way to distill what you know in a way that others can remember and repeat, and make it a chance for others to pick up what you're doing and carry it forward, amplify you, for example. If you're talking in gobbledygook, or if you don't just take the time to distill those messages, and you don't put yourself out in a visible way, you're actually undercutting that possible success and that momentum that you really want to have. So the shout chapter is really that, is figuring out those messages, figuring out who your audience is, and making yourself discoverable in ways that, in little buckets and in little ways that people can pick up and carry forward for you.
How can we audit our impact?
Well, the good news is there's just a ton of tools out there. I mean, I just start with the simplest one. I have a little Google alert that's set up on my email every day. And the word thought leader, the name of my book, thought leadership, I have a few just terms that I'm monitoring. I've been monitoring them for years now. And every day I get this little summary of who's using these phrases. And when I first started, thought leader was hardly ever used. Now I can get, a list of this long of all the articles that somebody has said the word thought leader in this last week, the last day. It's so fun to see that happen. That's a simple audit. Like, how is the word thought leader, and how is the way people are accepting the phrase thought leadership changing? Because again, it used to be this was all about content management or self-marketing or self-branding. Now I think it's really more about the way I think about it, and that's what I'm hoping for, and that's what I'm auditing. So whether it's a Google alert or all the way up to, there's just a ton of great tools. I think I have a whole article on my website of, there are tons of different technology tools you can use to track. But what you're trying to track is whether it be a set of phrases that you use commonly, like for me, being discoverable is something I say a lot. I want to track that, or whether I start to see my tribe get bigger on Google Plus or on Facebook, so you can track those kind of numbers. Sometimes it's tracking within your company. Are people adopting? Are they showing up at my events? Are they saying what I'm saying? Are they getting that change to happen? So there's a lot of ways, but if you're not auditing, you don't have that satisfaction of seeing progress. So I don't think it's all about the numbers as far as how many Twitter followers I have. What I care instead about is the change I'm advocating moving forward, and is the point of view that I want to be seen in the world actually getting traction.
So Guy Kawasaki wrote the foreword to your book, which is terrific. What's your favorite piece of advice that Guy gives?
Well, Guy is fun because, I've known him for years, and he was so fun when I called him. I said, I'd love to have you do the foreword for my book. And we ended up, in a typical Guy fashion, having this argument about what is a thought leader, and not everybody, he says to me, not everybody can be a thought leader. And so when he wrote the foreword, I loved it because he talked very sincerely from his heart, and his point was, you don't appoint yourself a thought leader, someone else appoints you. Someone else anoints you, really, is the right frame. And I think he's right. All the work that we're doing, it's not because we're trying to get thought leader next to our name. And until someone calls you that, you shouldn't call yourself that. And I think he wanted to make sure that that was the point of view of my book before he was going to agree to be creating the foreword. And I honor that because I completely agree with him. And he's such a great guy to be out sharing these his own thought leadership in the world so broadly that I loved him as the spokesperson for helping me get the word out about my book.
Denise, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your wisdom and your expertise and your book, Ready to be a Thought Leader, which is just chock full of so much good advice. We really appreciate it.
Happy to be here, Jennifer. I really appreciate you inviting me. Very much enjoyed it.
This is Starter TV. I'm Jennifer Crumpton. Thanks so much for joining us today, and we look forward to seeing you next time.